Hey everybody, my name is Mark Aperio, and this is Clear History 3, the September 11th attacks, what happened and why. On Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, 19 men boarded 4 airplanes in Washington, D.C., Newark, New Jersey, and Boston, Massachusetts. These men were members of Al-Qaeda, a militant organization with a history of perpetrating terrorist acts, and who described themselves as Muslim. The plan they were about to execute had been in development since January 2000. Between 7:59 a.m. and 8:20 a.m., 3 of the planes took off. The 4th, Flight 93 in Newark, had been delayed and it departed at 8:40 a.m. About 20 minutes into each flight, the Al-Qaeda teams used box cutters to kill the pilots and hijack the planes, killing and wounding several passengers and flight attendants in the process. Each hijacking group included one member who had been trained as a pilot at an American flight school. That person assumed control of the plane and diverted its flight path. The 2 planes from Boston headed toward New York City. The plane from Washington, D.C. was headed back there after flying about 100 miles west. The plane from Newark was also meant to go to Washington. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 struck near the top of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, killing everyone on the plane, hundreds in the building, and trapping hundreds more above the impact zone. While television cameras were trained on the situation at the North Tower, United Airlines 175 crashed into the South Tower, resulting in the deaths of all on board and hundreds in the building. The impact in the South Tower was lower than in the North, and all stairways were destroyed except for one, which was badly damaged. Consequently, more people were trapped above the impact area in the South Tower than in the North. That a major terrorist attack had commenced became obvious after the second plane strike. At 9:37 a.m., American Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., killing all on board and 125 in the building. At the World Trade Center, enormous fires raged, initially sparked by the combustion of thousands of gallons of plane fuel, but then sustained by flammable materials inside the buildings. Each building's fire suppression system had been destroyed by the impacts, and the fire-retarding foam which coated the building's structural supports had been blown off by the collisions. Steel beams were therefore exposed to the intense heat of the fire and gradually weakened them. To escape the ferocious heat and stifling smoke of the fires, about 200 people who were trapped above the damaged zones chose to jump to their deaths. Firefighters were in each building, rescuing people and trying to reach the fires. However, they were unable to reach the damaged zones on the high upper floors before the buildings collapsed. Rescuing the trapped people by air wasn't possible because the roofs were not accessible and because thick black smoke obscured visibility, making helicopter landings impossible. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapsed. 2,753 people were killed in the World Trade Center attack. After Flight 93 was hijacked, passengers learned from loved ones about the attacks on New York and Washington. Realizing the hijackers' intent but determined to retake control of their own destinies, passengers voted to attack the hijackers. According to the plane's cockpit voice recorder, it's clear that passengers overpowered the hijackers stationed outside the cockpit. Passengers were attempting to break into the cockpit when the Al-Qaeda pilot flew the plane into the ground in a field in southwestern Pennsylvania outside Shanksville, killing everyone on board. But by fighting back, the passengers thwarted the hijackers from completing their plan, which was to crash the plane into the White House or the Capitol, destroying a national monument and killing hundreds. That evening, 7 World Trade Center, 47 stories, collapsed due to damage from the attacks and from fire. Because the area had been evacuated, no one was injured. 2,996 people were murdered in the attacks, and hundreds more were injured or exposed to conditions that would cause later and long-term illness. People from 62 countries were among the dead. So, what happened? President George W. Bush repeatedly told Americans that the attacks were because the terrorists, quote, hated our freedom. However, that explanation is simplistic and inaccurate. In 1996, Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, issued a fatwa, or Islamic religious ruling, entitled Declaration of War Against the Americans Occupying the Land of the Two Holy Places. Because this document encourages followers to attack Americans, the United States, and its interests, it's considered bin Laden's declaration of war against the United States. Its title is a reference to the American military presence in Saudi Arabia, which is home to Islam's 2 holiest sites, Mecca and Medina. The American military was first deployed to Saudi Arabia in 1990 to defend it from Iraq, immediately after Iraq's 1990 invasion of neighboring Kuwait. But after Iraq was defeated in the resulting Persian Gulf War, Americans and Saudis agreed to keep American forces in Saudi Arabia to deter Iraq's President Saddam Hussein from further aggression. The presence of a non-Islamic foreign military on the Holy Land of Saudi Arabia infuriated bin Laden and his followers. According to the fatwa, another source of his animosity toward the United States was American support of Israel. There has been deep and broad hostility in the Arab world toward Israel, a Jewish state, since its establishment in 1948, and consequent displacement of Arabs who were living in the land that became Israel. Israel's treatment of these people, the Palestinians, has aroused tremendous bitterness among Arabs over the decades. American aid and advocacy of Israel has been considered by many Arabs to be an endorsement of Israel's conduct or misconduct toward Palestinians. In his fatwa, bin Laden claimed that Muslims have been victims of aggression by a Zionist Crusader alliance, that is, a Jewish-American alliance. Bin Laden argued that Americans and Israelis are responsible for the poverty, underdevelopment, political oppression, and regional conflicts that afflict Muslim nations in the Middle East. According to his own words, and we have no reason to doubt them, bin Laden opposed or hated the United States because of its presence in Saudi Arabia, its support of Israel, and its involvement in Muslim affairs in the Middle East, which he believed resulted in hardship, despotism, and instability in that region. These are the reasons that motivated the September 11th attacks and earlier ones by al-Qaeda, not that they hated our freedom. More than a decade has passed since the September 11th attacks. The World Trade Center area has been rebuilt, the Pentagon has been repaired, and Osama bin Laden has been killed. However, the consequences of that day are visible in the violence and instability in Iraq and Syria, the anxiety and strife in Afghanistan, the enhanced power and prestige of Iran, the frequent unrest in Pakistan, and in the recent spree murders in Europe. In the United States itself, the residue of September 11th is manifested by a prying and omniscient national security state, by restricted access to public buildings now surrounded by heavily armed guards, by the use of torture against prisoners, by the indefinite detention of people without charge, and by costly, ceaseless, undeclared, and often secret war conducted all over the world. History can always explain the present, but sometimes it's not necessary to go very far back to understand why things are the way they are. This has been the September 11th attacks, what happened and why. I hope it's provided some insights. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Till next time.